It was one of Boris Johnson's forebears who uttered the now immortal line that a week is indeed a long time in politics. And a week is indeed a long time, especially next week. And if you are, shall we say, following British politics in any serious way, or even a casual way, then I definitely urge you that Wednesday and Thursday are potentially going to be absolutely explosive next week. For one reason and one reason alone. Dominic Cummings is coming to give testimony on his time in Boris Johnson's cabinet, as well as Boris Johnson's response to the COVID crisis. Something which was ultimately and partly responsible for, well, Boris Johnson's so much triumphant victory. And this is going to perfectly crash with so much other stuff that's been going on. And honestly, next Wednesday is going to be big. Like, depending on how much stuff happens, next Wednesday evening, I may have to do a live stream. Because this could be a continuing series of... who knows? Who knows? Because we're going to have Monday and Tuesday waiting. Wednesday is going to be the big reveal. And then this, by the way, Cummings questioning is going to directly happen before Prime Minister's question time. So what is going to happen is we're going to get all these revelations from Cummings, and then Boris is going to get an absolute grilling by MPs. So, it is going to be one incredible Wednesday. But before we do get to that, and we talk about, shall we say, the darkening clouds on Boris's horizon after his very sunlit upland 2 weeks he's had since the local elections and his by-election victory, let's me just say this. Please do remember to hit those like, share and subscribe buttons. And also down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link. And as always, thank you to all those people who do support the channel. Like I say, you are supporting independent commentators like me. And thank you very much to all those people that do support the channel that way. So, onwards into this, because woohoo! Like I say, this is going to be next week. Next week is going to be interesting. Very, very interesting. So, this comes from The Guardian, and the title is, How Quickly Boris Johnson's Triumph Has Given Way to Doubt and Instability. So, treachery, the crafty French diplomat Talleyrand argued, is largely a matter of dates. And Boris Johnson, who is no less of a political cynic than Talleyrand, would be wise to remember that this may also be true of triumph. It was only a fortnight since voters flocked to Johnson's Conservatives in England's local elections. At that moment, Johnson commanded the political scene and apparently was untouchable, to much the despair of his opponents. A mere 2 weeks later, the clouds have darkened over Johnson's coronavirus strategy like a gathering storm. His apparent sure touch in steering the country out of the worst of the pandemic and reaping the enormous electoral credit for the success of the vaccine programme has begun to look more conditional. Johnson's public vulnerability within his party and in Parliament and with the public is now more apparent than at any time this year. And several things are converging to mean that how this important is, if not yet a decisive change in the politics of COVID, should be very carefully noted. The signs range from the embarrassing resignation this week of a nurse who helped to save Johnson's own life in St Thomas Hospital last year, to the confused messaging of successive government ministers as international leisure travel resumes before the pandemic is over. More mixed messaging from the Prime Minister on this issue at Prime Minister's Questions today also added further to the stew. However, the most potent reason for the change is the threat of the potential of the variant, first identified in India, to Johnson's roadmap for leaving lockdown. The threat itself is hydra-headed in its subversive potential. It risks a resurgence in COVID cases, not just in some districts and pretty big places, but across the country. It is especially true of the B.1672 type variant, or the inevitable future variants of proves even more transmissible. The loosening of lockdown and the increase in travel and social contact make this a very fearsome possibility, despite the vaccine's program's undoubted success. Politically, this means, because it has the potential to force Johnson to do the one iconic thing he has been determined at all this year not to do: reimpose lockdowns as vaccination rates rise. After delays and the confusion that characterised his handling of the coronavirus during 2020, Johnson plumped decisively for caution and consistency at the start of 2021. Lockdown and vaccines were the twin pillars of this approach that transformed his standing with the public and silenced his Tory critics, along with this all seemed to be working. The test of this policy was always going to come when it was loosened, not while it was fully in force. But any talk about the possible reintroduction of local lockdowns and tiers, which did not work when they were tried before, and whose failure led directly to the New Year nationwide lockdowns, shows how fragile this strategy actually remains. So, does opening up to foreign travel more widely at exactly the same time, when the increase in the latest variant appears so closely related to the government's earlier failures to control the borders? These were foreseeable moments of a crisis inherent in the policy itself. As long as lockdown continued, they could be suppressed, but there were always going to be dormant. And a significant minority of Conservative MPs have zipped their lips since January, but have not changed their minds if there is a choice to be made between public lockdown and economic activity. As there will be in June, they will always choose the latter, using the language of liberty to disguise an essential indifference to the pandemic's victims and their hostility to the state's core responsibilities. At which point, we now enter Dominic Cummings. This week, the Prime Minister's former strategist dismissed attempts to follow a trade-off approach between lockdown and economic recovery as disastrous. He said, "This nonsense is still influencing policy, e.g. our joke border policy," he tweeted on Tuesday. "The key to the pandemic was hard, fast, effective action to lock down. The success of the vaccine task force and the rollout of the government had them complacent." Cummings will give evidence to the Joint Health and Science Committee investigating the handling of the pandemic next Wednesday. The sessions will be a very high-stakes event, which will happen just before next week's PMQs. But Cummings has already said enough to make it clear that he will attack precisely the strategy on which Johnson relied with such political success this spring. He will do so, moreover, at exactly the same time when the unstable convergence between the surge of the Indian variant and confusion over foreign travel makes the challenge potentially explosive. Just a week ago, Johnson still felt confident enough in his success of his COVID strategy to concede the case for an independent public inquiry into the pandemic response, on which he had previously reneged on. Many key aspects of the inquiry are yet to be confirmed, not least its membership, its terms of reference, and its UK-wide scope. Yet, Johnson would have never made that announcement had he felt that his conclusions to it would pose a threat to him. But, as Cummings says, Johnson had become complacent about the trade-off strategy. The May elections boosted his confidence that he felt he could win a general election in 2023 without having to worry about an inquiry that would not start before 2022. and would not at least report before 2024. Now, a mere 8 days later, all that looks far more uncertain. Political triumphs are indeed a matter of dates, and as one of Johnson's ministerial predecessors once said, a week is a long time in politics. And ladies and gentlemen, what a week it will be next week. Cummings giving evidence, and we've already seen that Cummings is out for blood, essentially. He's out for... He's none other than, I suspect, to essentially dethrone Boris. I highly suspect that may be Cummings' raison d'etre, shall we say, at the moment in life. And trust me, his testimony is going to be explosive. And obviously after that, you then have Prime Minister's question times, almost proceeding directly after that. Now, we have seen in the past that Johnson has run away from Prime Minister's question times before. So, if Johnson feels that what Cummings said at PMQs, but prior to PMQs, was that explosive that he feels he doesn't want to handle it and he doesn't want to be embarrassed even more, then he may very well run away from PMQs. Like I say, he may hand it off to someone else. He may hand it off to the Deputy Prime Minister. Who knows? Like I say, Boris has done a runner before at PMQs. And again, there's nothing stopping him from doing that again. So he may very, very well decide to do that. Not only that, but also Matt Hancock too will potentially receive a grilling as well. Like I say, next week is going to be infinitely fascinating for the journey of COVID. So, as always, please do hit that subscribe button and the bell to see the videos that will happen next week, because, oh my word, it is going to be a doozy. And of course, please remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, if you would like to support the channel, you can do so by the links down below to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee. And of course, we'll see you tomorrow morning for a good morning walk. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.